I don't believe. I do not believe in climate change. There is an overwhelming body of scientific evidence that tells us that greenhouse gas emissions add to our atmosphere, causing global warming and creating climate change. I don't believe in climate change, I accept the evidence. Who accepts the evidence? There is multiple science sources. There are multiple scientists from multiple science disciplines that tell us that climate change is happening as a consequence of global warming, and we need to act to do something about it. But the problem is the message. The problem is, how do we translate what 1 degree, what 2 degrees of warming is? If you warm the Arctic or the Antarctic by 1 degree, you shift climate belts 500 kilometres. If you warm the equator by about 1 degree, the effect is much lower. It's much under 100 kilometres. If you select our belt of climate here in Perth and you warm our climate belt by 1 degree, you move our climate belt 150 kilometres. Okay, and we're talking about 2 degrees of climate belt shift. 1 degree of climate belt shift takes Perth's climate down to Margaret River and brings the pinnacles to Perth. 2 degrees of warming is 300 kilometres of climate belt shift. 300 kilometres takes Margaret River past the ocean, and the wines and the karri forest, they don't grow in the ocean. And 300 kilometres takes Perth down to Augusta, Perth's temperatures down to Augusta, and brings Geraldton and Cervantes down to Perth. That's what 300 kilometres of climate belt shift is. That's what 2 degrees of temperature warming for a climate belt means. It's phenomenally scary, and it should be. It shouldn't be too scary because we can act, but let's think about this science. CSIRO have told us the science in Australia. Many science leaders in Australia have explained what will happen with 2 degrees of warming and 3 degrees. Some places warm a little bit more and other places warm a little bit less. The problem for Perth and Western Australia is that the CSIRO tell us we get a bigger share. We don't get a bigger share of the GST, but we get a bigger share of global warming. This is brilliant. 5 degrees of warming by 2070. 5 degrees of warming on a climate belt means 750 kilometres of climate belt shift. That's almost Carnarvon, that's Shark Bay to Perth. That's the sort of climate change we're talking about if we don't act, and we need to act. There's enough science for us to act. There's enough knowledge for us to act. And there's enough willingness and crowd for us to act. So are we going to act? Yes! Are we going to tell our leaders that it's time for everyone to act, not just follow? Yes! There's a lot more impacts I can talk about. Ocean acidification, ocean warming, sea level rise. There are so many implications for global warming, but I'm going to get a wind up in a second and I need to hurry. So the role of science is to inquire into things. It's to ask questions. It's to poke things. And it's to do that by experimenting and researching. And it develops hypotheses and it takes those hypotheses into theories. And theories are really good things. They're really sound things. Pythagoras' theorem, the theory of relativity, and the theory of anthropogenic global warming. These are all sound theories in science. And we need to respond to these things. And science tells us, the community, what's happening. Everybody can have their own opinion. I don't believe everybody's entitled to their own opinion unless they're versed with the facts. But nobody on this planet, nobody is entitled to their own facts. The fact is this planet is warming. The fact is this planet is warming because of greenhouse gas emissions. That's driving climate change, and climate change threatens the planet that we live on. We need to act. We must act. If not now, when? We must take action, and the time is now. All I can say is that the future is clear. Renewable energy is available to us today. It's affordable today, and we can do much of what we want to do with energy today from renewables. And into the future, renewables will be doing 100% of that. There's hope for the future. There's an expectation for the future, but we need to act. We need to act now to ensure that that future is the one that we want, not the one that we fell into. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ray.
We already know that this unprecedented ecological crisis demands action now. We already know of the 11 million people that are affected in the Philippines at the moment because of the pointy end of this ecological crisis. We already know how this is affecting the poorest of the poor, and there is no way to care for the global poor without caring about climate change. There's no way to care about climate change without caring for the global poor. But this morning, I don't want to talk about the stuff that we know. I want to talk about where we're going, and I want to talk about how we assess how successful this morning has been. And in terms of Get Up this morning tweeting that 60,000 people are out like you this morning saying that this really matters. Thank you. It's not about the decision Tony Abbott makes in response to what's happening. It's the decisions that we make together right here about going deeper in the movement. This morning, how many of us have actually signed up to divest where we're banking our money and say we don't want our money going into this catastrophic climate change? Show of hands. Now, if you are standing next to somebody with their hand up and you want to and haven't yet, talk to them. Make sure you make it to the 350 stand. Gandhi would insist that non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as cooperation with good. One of the first steps we can make is not merely doing something, but stop doing a bunch of stuff. Now, it is important that we have market mechanisms to actually hold the big polluters accountable. But as a pastor, it might not be surprising to hear from me this morning that I've said on a number of occasions that the market mechanisms aren't the Messiah. It's just that the big polluters are very naughty boys. And we need mechanisms to hold them accountable. We need mechanisms to make sure it's transparent, but we also need to make sure that this morning we are not giving away our power to Tony Abbott, but taking that power back and getting involved in real action. Martin Luther King did not make the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement made Martin Luther King. He would insist that it's not, in fact, in the words of Tina Turner, we don't need another hero. We need regular, problematic, annoying people like the people you're standing next to and the people that we are right now to take this movement to the next level. Don't look to our Prime Minister in the way he responds. Look to each other about the way we're going to respond. How are you going to divest? How are you going to take real action? Because we can't wait. So this morning, don't look for another hero. Don't look to the leaders. You are the leaders you've been waiting for. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. It's time to move on from the debate and start implementing appropriate solutions. Polling clearly demonstrates that the majority of Australian voters, no matter what their political views are, want stronger action on climate change. Is that you? Yeah! Strong, meaningful action requires 1. A commitment to cut Australia's pollution by at least 25%, at least by 2020, our fair share. 2. A price and a limit on carbon emissions that can achieve stronger pollution cuts. 3, a commitment to move Australia beyond coal and gas by shifting investment away from fossil fuels to more renewable energy. We, all gathered here today with our phones out ready, demand that our government respects the science. Ray, we respect you. Aims higher on climate We're asking for strong, meaningful climate action, which is in the national and global interest. Now, if you agree with that petition and those 3 points particularly, please send a message now containing your email address and your postcode. So we want you to SMS it to 0400 662 662. Once you've done that, if you could put your hand in the air so we have an idea of how many strong and how many have gotten through. Yeah. Someone's asked, how do you send a text? We're going to have a workshop to put up their hands to say we've all joined together today. Fantastic.
And it is not I'm not proudly standing here to say that Western Australia is at the forefront of the impact of climate change. But the reality is we are. We are already seeing declining rainfalls in our wheat belt. It will affect our agriculture. It is already affecting our oceans. Ocean warming is already happening off our shores, just that way. We're already seeing marine ecosystems shift further south. Species of fish found here around Perth that have never been here before. It is imperative that we take action now. It is imperative that we send a message to all our politicians who actually follow the community. That is why it's so important that we have grassroots action, that every single one of you has the power to make this change, has the power to send a message by talking in your community, by communicating to your community, by talking to your politicians and sending those messages so that future generations can enjoy the planet in a better state than if we weren't taking action on climate change. This is a climate emergency.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Bonnie. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Noongar people and say how delighted I am to be joined by my Federal Labor Party colleagues Melissa Park and Alana McTiernan today. Both of them, proud and strong advocates for action on climate change. Today, we are standing with you and tens of thousands of other Australians right around the nation who want strong and meaningful action on climate change. This nation, our nation, stands at a crossroads, one where we can be dragged backwards by conservative climate change deniers, or one where we can step forward into the future and play our part in taking meaningful action on climate change. John Howard last week told a London audience that those of us who believe in the science of climate change are zealots, and that he would prefer to trust his instincts rather than listen to, as I will do and as my colleagues will do, the 97% of climate change scientists who recognise and argue and believe and have researched and established the evidence that says climate change is real. Labor's position on climate change is real. We accept the science. We accept the need that we must take meaningful action on climate change. We can't afford to fall behind the rest of the world on climate change action. This is clear.
Every one of us made a choice to be here today, and right now we have another choice to make. We need to send a message that if our politicians won't lead, then we will, and we'll leave them no choice but to follow. UN climate talks in Doha, Yeb Sano, the lead negotiator for the Philippines, asked, "If not us, then who? And if not now, then when? And if not here, then where?" I hope today serves as a poignant reminder to our leaders in Western Australia that there are thousands of people in this state who are asking for strong action on climate change now. Thank you.